The sound of children's laughter drifting across the empty plains caught Cooper Irving's attention like nothing had in the 3 years since his wife died, and he reined in his horse to discover its source in the shade of a massive cottonwood tree where a young woman sat surrounded by a dozen youngsters, a worn book in her hands. Cooper had been riding the boundaries of his ranch outside Bisbee, Arizona, checking fence lines in the spring heat of 1882, when the unexpected sound pulled him from his usual brooding thoughts. The woman wore a simple blue calico dress, her honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical bun, and she read with such animation that even from a distance he could see the children leaning forward, captivated by whatever tale she wove. He dismounted quietly, not wanting to disturb the scene, but his horse snorted and several children turned. The woman looked up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, and Cooper found himself staring into the most striking green eyes he had ever encountered. "Good afternoon," she called out, her voice clear and confident despite being interrupted by a stranger. "Can I help you?" Cooper removed his hat, suddenly aware of how dusty and unkempt he must appear. "I apologize for the intrusion, madam. I own the land you're on, but I meant no offense. I heard the children and wanted to make sure everything was all right." The woman stood, brushing off her skirt, and he could see she was younger than he first thought, perhaps in her mid-20s. "I'm sorry for trespassing. This is the only tree for miles that provides adequate shade, and the children need somewhere to learn. My name is Katherine Shaw, and I've been teaching these children for the past 2 months. Teaching them." Cooper glanced at the assembled group, ranging from what looked like 6 years old to maybe 13. Some were clearly children of ranch hands. Others appeared to be from the few farming families scattered throughout the territory. "Bisbee doesn't have a school?" Catherine's jaw tightened slightly. "Bisbee has a schoolhouse, but it closed last year when the teacher left, and the mining company decided education wasn't profitable enough to fund. These children deserve better than ignorance, so I teach them what I can." Something in her fierce determination struck a chord deep in Cooper's chest, a feeling he thought had died with his wife Sarah. He studied the makeshift classroom, noting the children sitting on blankets, a few precious books stacked on a flat rock, and slates being shared between students. "How did you end up in Bisbee, Miss Shaw?" he asked, genuinely curious. "It's Mrs. Shaw, actually," she corrected, and Cooper felt an unexpected disappointment. "I'm a widow. My husband was a miner who died in a collapse 8 months ago. I came here with him from Philadelphia, thinking we'd make our fortune and return east. Instead, I'm trying to keep his memory alive by doing something meaningful." The children had grown restless during the adult conversation, and one small boy with a freckled face spoke up. "Mrs. Shaw, are we done for today? My pa needs me to help with the horses." Katherine smiled warmly at the boy. "Yes, Tommy, we're finished. Everyone remember to practice your letters tonight, and tomorrow we'll continue our arithmetic lessons." The children scattered like dandelion seeds on the wind, their voices carrying across the prairie as they headed in various directions toward their homes. Cooper remained standing by his horse, trying to formulate words that wouldn't sound foolish. "Mr. Irving," Katherine said, surprising him that she knew his name. "I understand if you'd prefer we find another location. I know we're trespassing on your property." "How do you know my name?" he asked. "Everyone in Bisbee knows Cooper Irving. You own the largest cattle ranch in this part of Arizona territory, and your wife passed away 3 years ago from fever. People talk, especially in small towns." Cooper shifted his weight, uncomfortable with being known but not knowing. "You can keep using the tree, Mrs. Shaw. But I have a question. What would you need to teach these children properly?" Catherine's eyes widened slightly. "Properly. I'd need walls to block the wind, a roof for when the rains come, desks so the children don't have to sit on the ground, a proper chalkboard, more books, paper, pencils, and a guarantee that some angry parent or town official won't shut us down because they think children should be working instead of learning. What if I built you a schoolhouse? The words escaped Cooper's mouth before his brain fully processed them, but once spoken, he realized he meant them completely. Katherine stared at him as if he had suddenly sprouted wings. What? Why would you do that? Because you're right. These children deserve better. Because I have the means and the materials. Because my ranch has plenty of timber and I have men who know how to build. And because... He paused, searching for the truth. Because seeing you here, doing this, is the first thing that's made me feel alive in 3 years. The honesty of his last statement hung in the air between them like morning fog. Katherine's expression softened, and she clutched the book in her hands a bit tighter. Mr. Irving, I appreciate the sentiment, but building a school would be a massive undertaking. I couldn't possibly accept such a gift without some way to repay you. Then teach, Cooper said simply. Teach these children and any others who want to learn. That would be payment enough. Katherine bit her lower lip, clearly torn between hope and practicality. Where would you even build it? Right here, Cooper gestured to the area around the cottonwood. This spot is relatively flat. There's water in the creek just over that rise, and it's roughly central to most of the families whose children attend. I'll build it on my land and deed the plot to the town for educational purposes. That way, no one can claim it's private property being used inappropriately. You've thought about this quite thoroughly in the span of 5 minutes, Katherine observed, and Cooper caught the hint of amusement in her voice. I make quick decisions. It served me well in ranching, he replied. What do you say, Mrs. Shaw? Will you let me build you a school? Katherine looked around at the open prairie, at the lone cottonwood tree, and then back at Cooper. On one condition, you let me help. I won't sit idly by while others do all the work for my benefit. Cooper extended his hand. Deal. Her hand was smaller than his, but her grip was firm and confident. The moment their palms touched, Cooper felt electricity run up his arm, and from the slight intake of breath from Katherine, he suspected she felt it too. They held the handshake perhaps a moment longer than necessary before both stepping back. I should get back to town, Katherine said, gathering her few books. I board with Mrs. Henderson on Copper Street. She'll be expecting me for supper. I'll ride with you, make sure you get there safely, Cooper offered. That's not necessary. I've been making this walk for 2 months without incident. Maybe so, but now that I know you're out here alone, I'd feel better seeing you safely to town. Besides, we need to discuss the school plans. Katherine seemed ready to argue but then relented. All right, but I'm perfectly capable of walking. I never doubted that, Mrs. Shaw, but there's no reason you should have to walk when I have a horse. Before she could protest, Cooper swung himself into the saddle and extended his hand down to her. Climb up. We'll ride double. Mr. Irving, that's highly improper. So is a widow teaching under a tree in the middle of nowhere, but you do it anyway because it's the right thing. This is practical, nothing more. Katherine hesitated, then placed her books in the saddlebag and accepted his hand. Cooper pulled her up behind him with ease, and she settled onto the horse's back, initially trying to maintain distance between them, but quickly realizing she'd fall off without holding on. Her arms encircled his waist tentatively. Ready? He asked, intensely aware of her presence behind him. As I'll ever be, she replied. They rode toward Bisbee in the late afternoon sun, the horse moving at a gentle pace. Cooper found himself acutely conscious of every breath Katherine took, the warmth of her hands clasped at his waist, the way she smelled faintly of lavender despite a day spent in the prairie dust. Tell me about your ranch, Katherine said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Not much to tell. I came out here from Texas 10 years ago with nothing but a horse and determination. Built the ranch from scratch, married Sarah 5 years later and lost her 3 years ago. Now I run cattle, employ about 15 men, and try to keep myself busy enough not to think too much." "That sounds lonely." "It is," Cooper admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. "But loneliness becomes familiar after a while. You learn to live with it like an old coat that doesn't fit quite right anymore, but you wear anyway because it's all you have." Katherine was quiet for a moment. "I understand that feeling more than you might think. After Henry died, I felt like I was walking through fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt real. Teaching the children helped. It gave me purpose again." "Is that why you stayed in Bisbee instead of returning to Philadelphia?" "Partially. Also, I had nothing to return to. My parents passed before I married Henry, and I was an only child. Henry was my family, and when he died, I realized Bisbee was more my home than Philadelphia ever was. At least here, people knew him, remembered him. Going back east would have meant erasing him entirely." They crested a small hill, and Bisbee came into view below them. The town had grown considerably with the success of the copper mines, sprawling across the valley with a mix of wooden buildings, tents, and more permanent structures. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from a distance, they could hear the sounds of hammers and machinery that never seemed to stop in a mining town. "It's not much to look at, but it's home," Katherine said softly. "I think it's got potential," Cooper replied, "especially if it has a proper school." They rode down the main street, and Cooper was acutely aware of the stares they attracted. A widow and a widower riding double into town would fuel gossip for weeks, but he found he didn't care as much as he probably should. Let people talk. He was doing a good thing, helping establish a school. There was nothing scandalous about that. He stopped in front of a neat boarding house with white painted trim and helped Katherine dismount. She retrieved her books from the saddlebag and looked up at him. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Irving, and for your generous offer. I'll hold you to it." "I expect you to. I'll start gathering materials tomorrow and speak with my foreman about which men can be spared for construction. Weather permitting, we should be able to have the basic structure up within a month." Katherine's face lit up with genuine joy, and Cooper felt his heart stutter. She was beautiful when she smiled like that, unguarded and hopeful. A month. That seems impossibly fast. You'd be surprised what motivated men can accomplish. I'll come by tomorrow afternoon after you finish teaching to discuss the details, if that's acceptable. Yes, of course. I'll be back at the cottonwood at the same time. Cooper tipped his hat. Until tomorrow then, Mrs. Shaw. Until tomorrow, Mr. Irving, and please call me Katherine. If we're going to be working together on this project, formality seems excessive. Only if you call me Cooper. All right then, Cooper. Good evening. Good evening, Katherine. He rode away feeling lighter than he had in years, already mentally planning the schoolhouse design. It would need to be sturdy enough to withstand Arizona's harsh weather, large enough to accommodate growth, and comfortable enough that children would want to come learn. Windows for light, a good stove for winter, proper desks and shelves for books. When Cooper returned to his ranch as the sun set, his foreman Marcus Webb met him at the stable. Marcus was a weathered man in his 40s who had been with Cooper since the beginning. "You're late," Marcus observed. "Everything all right with the fences? Fences are fine." "I found something more interesting." Cooper dismounted and began unsaddling his horse. "There's a woman teaching children under the big cottonwood on the eastern section. Been doing it for months apparently, since the town school closed." Marcus raised an eyebrow. And I told her I'd build a proper schoolhouse." "You did what?" Cooper grinned at his foreman's shocked expression. You heard me. I need you to select 4 good men who can be spared from ranch duties for the next month. We're building a school." Marcus removed his hat and ran a hand through his graying hair. "Boss, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but that's a hell of an undertaking." "Why?" "Because those children need it. Because it's the right thing to do. And because the woman teaching them reminded me that there's more to life than just existing day to day." Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. "What's her name?" "Katherine Shaw. She's a widow, lost her husband in the mines last year. She's from Philadelphia, educated and stubborn enough to teach outdoors in Arizona heat because she believes in what she's doing." "Sounds like someone else I know," Marcus said with a slight smile. "All right, boss. I'll get the men together. We'll need to cut timber, prepare a foundation, and source supplies from town. This is going to cost a fair amount." "I don't care about the cost. Make it happen, Marcus, and make it good. This isn't some thrown-together shack. It needs to last." "Yes, sir. We'll start tomorrow." Cooper headed to his house, a solid 2-story structure he had built with his own hands shortly after marrying Sarah. It sat on a rise overlooking the ranch, offering views of the rolling hills and distant mountains. Inside, everything was neat but impersonal. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, kept it clean, but it lacked the warmth it had when Sarah was alive. He ate a solitary dinner, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel the oppressive weight of loneliness. Instead, he felt anticipation for tomorrow, for seeing Katherine again, for beginning the school project. It was as if a door he'd sealed shut had suddenly blown open, letting light and air into a dusty, forgotten room. That night, Cooper lay in bed sketching rough plans for the schoolhouse by lamplight. It would be approximately 30 feet by 20 feet, with large windows on the south and east sides for maximum natural light. A potbelly stove in the center for heat. Built-in shelves along one wall for books and supplies. A raised platform at the front for the teacher's desk. He'd use good pine lumber for the walls and floor, cedar shingles for the roof. The cottonwood would provide shade during the brutal summer months. He fell asleep with the pencil still in his hand, dreaming of green eyes and children's laughter. The next morning, Cooper was up before dawn, energized in a way he hadn't been in years. He met with Marcus and the selected crew, explaining his vision for the schoolhouse. The men listened attentively, asking practical questions about materials and timeline. "We'll need to level the ground first," said James Porter, one of Cooper's most experienced hands. "That spot under the cottonwood has a slight slope. Foundation needs to be level or the whole building will settle crooked." "Do whatever it takes to do it right," Cooper instructed. "I don't care if it takes an extra week. Quality matters more than speed." The men loaded wagons with tools and headed out to begin preliminary work. Cooper handled morning ranch business, but his mind kept drifting to the afternoon when he'd see Katherine again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he saddled his horse and rode toward the cottonwood. He arrived to find Katherine dismissing her students for the day. The children waved goodbye, and several called out greetings to Cooper, clearly having heard about the planned schoolhouse from their parents. Word traveled fast in small communities. Katherine walked over as he dismounted, and he noticed she had changed into a different dress, this one a soft green that matched her eyes. Her hair was still pulled back practically, but a few tendrils had escaped, framing her face. "You actually came," she said, though there was no real surprise in her voice. "Did you doubt I would?" "Perhaps a little. Grand gestures in daylight sometimes seem foolish by morning." "I don't make foolish gestures," Cooper said. "I've already got men starting work on site preparation." "Come see." They walked to where his crew had begun surveying and marking the ground. Stakes with string outlined where the building would stand, positioned to maximize shade from the cottonwood while leaving enough space that the tree's roots wouldn't interfere with the foundation. Katherine stood in the center of the marked area, slowly turning to take it all in. "It's really happening," she whispered. "It's really happening," Cooper confirmed. "I want your input on everything. This is your school, I'm just the builder." "Our school," Katherine corrected. "This is for the children." Over the next hour, they discussed details. Katherine had opinions about window placement to avoid glare on the chalkboard, the height of desks to accommodate different aged children, and the need for a separate small area where older students could work independently while she taught younger ones. Cooper listened carefully, occasionally making notes in a small leather journal he carried. He found himself watching her as much as listening, captivated by the way her face animated when she talked about teaching, the passionate gestures of her hands, the way she bit her lower lip when considering something carefully. "What?" Katherine asked, catching him staring. "Nothing. Just thinking how lucky these children are to have a teacher who cares so much." She blushed slightly. "Education changed my life. My mother was a teacher before she married, and she made sure I understood the power of knowledge. These children deserve that same opportunity, regardless of whether their parents mine copper or raise cattle. Your mother sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was. She'd have liked this project. She always said that a community is only as strong as its commitment to educating the next generation." They walked back toward the cottonwood, and Cooper noticed Katherine shiver slightly despite the warm afternoon. "Are you cold?" he asked, concerned. "No, just someone walking over my grave, as my grandmother used to say. I'm fine." She smiled to prove it. "Cooper, I need to ask, why are you really doing this? Building this school is going to cost you significant time, money, and resources. There has to be more to it than just civic duty." Cooper considered his answer carefully. "When Sarah died, I died too, in a way. I kept running the ranch because it's all I knew how to do, but I was just going through motions. Yesterday, when I heard those children laughing and saw you teaching them, something inside me woke up. Building this school gives me purpose again. It's something good, something that will outlast me. Does that make sense?" Katherine's eyes had grown suspiciously bright. "Yes, it makes perfect sense. I felt the same way after Henry passed. Teaching gave me a reason to get out of bed each morning." They stood facing each other under the cottonwood, and Cooper felt the pull toward her like gravity. He wanted to reach out to touch her hand, to close the distance between them, but he held back. It was too soon, too fast, despite what his heart was telling him. "I should get you back to town," he said reluctantly. "Yes, I suppose you should." The ride back to Bisbee became a daily ritual over the following weeks. Cooper would arrive just as Katherine finished teaching. They'd discuss school progress and he'd take her home. Sometimes they rode in comfortable silence. Other times they talked about everything and nothing. Cooper learned that Katherine loved poetry but couldn't carry a tune to save her life. That she missed Philadelphia's libraries but loved Arizona's vast open spaces. That she was terrified of snakes but fascinated by coyotes. That she took her coffee with milk and sugar and preferred savory foods to sweet. Katherine learned that Cooper had learned to read from his mother, who died when he was 12. That he'd worked as a ranch hand in Texas before saving enough to start his own operation. That Sarah had been his childhood sweetheart, and losing her had felt like losing part of himself. That he played fiddle but hadn't touched the instrument since Sarah's death. The schoolhouse rose from the prairie like a promise being kept. Cooper's men worked efficiently, their respect for their boss driving them to do their finest work. The frame went up first, sturdy pine posts and beams that would support the structure for generations. Then came the walls, carefully fitted boards that Cooper himself inspected for quality. The windows were ordered from Tucson, real glass panes that cost a small fortune but would flood the classroom with natural light. Katherine visited the construction site daily, often bringing cool water and sandwiches for the workers. The men appreciated her thoughtfulness, and Cooper noticed how she learned all their names, asked about their families, and genuinely cared about them as people. It was just another thing that drew him to her. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into construction, a spring storm rolled in unexpectedly. Dark clouds gathered rapidly, and the wind picked up, scattering dust and tumbleweeds. Cooper was at the schoolhouse site when he saw Katherine hurrying toward town, still a good mile away from safety. He mounted his horse and galloped to intercept her. "Katherine," he called out. She turned, her skirts whipping in the wind, hair coming loose from its pins. The storm came up so fast. "Get up," he commanded, reaching down. She took his hand, and he pulled her up in front of him this time, settling her across his lap. He spurred the horse toward the nearest shelter, which happened to be a small lined shack on the edge of his property. They reached it just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Cooper dismounted and helped Katherine down, then led his horse into the attached lean-to before they both ducked inside the cabin. It was a simple structure, basically one room with a fireplace, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and shelves holding basic supplies. Cooper's men used it when working on the far sections of the ranch and needed to stay overnight. The rain began in earnest, drumming on the roof with intensity. Lightning flashed, followed by thunder that shook the small building. Katherine stood in the center of the room, dripping wet, her hair hanging loose around her shoulders. "We should get you dried off," Cooper said, grabbing a blanket from the bed. He wrapped it around her shoulders. "I'll get a fire going." He busied himself with kindling and wood from the box beside the fireplace, trying not to think about how the wet dress clung to Katherine's figure or how intimate this situation was. They were alone, trapped by the storm in a cabin with one bed. It would cause a scandal if anyone found out. "I can hear you thinking from here," Katherine said softly. "We didn't plan this. The storm isn't our fault." "I know, but people talk." "Let them talk. You've been nothing but honorable, Cooper. Anyone who suggests otherwise will have to deal with me." He got the fire lit and stood, turning to face her. Katherine had moved closer to the flames, the blanket still wrapped around her. Her green eyes reflected the firelight, and Cooper felt his resolve weakening. "You're shivering," he said. "I'm all right." "No, you're not. You need to get out of that wet dress before you catch your death." Katherine's eyes widened. "Cooper, I can't." "There's a spare work shirt in those supplies," he said, pointing to the shelves while keeping his eyes averted. "It'll be too big, but it's dry. I'll turn around and you can change. Then we'll hang your dress by the fire to dry." After a moment's hesitation, Katherine nodded. Cooper turned his back and stared intently at the wall while he listened to the rustle of fabric. His imagination supplied what his eyes couldn't see, and he felt heat that had nothing to do with the fire. "You can turn around now," Katherine said quietly. He did, and nearly lost his breath. She was swimming in his work shirt, the hem falling almost to her knees, her legs bare beneath. Her hair hung in damp waves down her back. She looked vulnerable and beautiful and absolutely perfect. Cooper cleared his throat. "I'll hang your dress." She handed him the wet garment, and he carefully draped it over a chair pulled close to the fire. Then he removed his own wet shirt, wringing it out and hanging it as well. He was aware of Katherine's eyes on his bare chest and shoulders, and the air between them seemed charged with more electricity than the storm outside. "We should sit," he said, gesturing to the chairs. They sat facing the fire, listening to the rain and thunder. Minutes passed in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt natural, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. "Tell me about Sarah," Katherine said suddenly. Cooper was surprised by the request. "Why?" "Because she was part of your life, part of who you are. I don't want to pretend she didn't exist. I want to understand you, and that includes understanding what you've lost." Cooper stared into the flames, gathering his thoughts. "Sarah was sunshine. That's the best way I can describe her. She found joy in everything, even the hardships. When we lost our first baby, she cried for a day and then said we'd try again. When drought killed half the herd our second year, she said it was an opportunity to start fresh. She made everything better just by being there." "How did you meet?" "We grew up together in Texas. Her father owned the ranch where my mother worked as a cook after my father died. Sarah and I played together as children, and as we got older, friendship turned into something more. When I decided to come to Arizona, she said she'd wait for me. 3 years later, I had enough saved to send for her. She sounds wonderful," she was, "but she's gone and I'm still here." Cooper turned to look at Katherine. "For 3 years I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd never feel anything again. Then I saw you under that cottonwood tree and something shifted. I'm not trying to replace Sarah. I could never do that. But maybe, just maybe, I can find happiness again." Katherine reached over and took his hand. "I think Sarah would want that for you. Henry would want that for me. They loved us enough that they'd want us to keep living, not just existing." Cooper looked down at their joined hands. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably about the same time you decided to build a schoolhouse for a woman you barely knew." They sat holding hands, watching the fire, while the storm raged outside. Eventually, Katherine's head drooped onto Cooper's shoulder and she fell asleep. He sat motionless, afraid to wake her, content to simply be there with her warmth against him. When she woke, the storm had passed and evening was approaching. Katherine sat up quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep on you. Don't apologize, you were tired." Cooper stood and checked her dress. "Still damp but wearable if we need to get you back to town. Mrs. Henderson will be worried. I'll explain the situation, she'll understand." Katherine changed back into her dress behind his turned back, and they rode slowly toward Bisbee in the soft evening light. The desert smelled fresh and clean after the rain, and puddles reflected the orange and pink sky. When they reached the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson was indeed waiting on the porch, worry evident on her lined face. But when Cooper explained about the unexpected storm and taking shelter in the lined shack, the older woman's expression softened. "These spring storms come up fierce," Mrs. Henderson said. "You did right getting her out of the weather, Mr. Irving. Katherine, come inside and get properly dried off. I've got Stu keeping warm." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson." Katherine turned to Cooper. "And thank you, Cooper, for everything." "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, reluctant to leave. "Tomorrow," she agreed. As Cooper rode home, he realized he was in love with Katherine Shaw. Somewhere between that first afternoon under the cottonwood and today's storm, he'd fallen completely and irrevocably in love with her. The question was, did she feel the same way? The schoolhouse was finished 5 weeks after construction began. It stood proud and solid under the cottonwood tree, its fresh wood gleaming golden in the sunlight. Cooper had made sure every detail was perfect. The desks were built and installed, graduated sizes to accommodate different ages. Shelves lined one wall, ready for books. A large chalkboard hung at the front, and Katherine's desk sat on a slightly raised platform. The potbelly stove was installed and tested. Windows sparkled. The floor was smooth and level. Cooper arranged a dedication ceremony for a Saturday afternoon, inviting all the families whose children attended, as well as town officials and anyone else interested. To his surprise, Nearly 200 people showed up, testimony to how much the community had needed this school. Katherine stood beside him on the small porch he'd added to the entrance, looking beautiful in a new dress. She'd sewn herself from fabric Cooper had noticed her admiring in the general store and anonymously had delivered to her. She didn't know it was from him, but seeing her wearing it filled him with quiet joy. "I can't believe this is real," she whispered to him as people gathered. "Believe it. You made this happen, Katherine. I just provided the building. We made it happen, together." The mayor of Bisbee, a portly man named Gerald Turnbull, stepped forward to speak. "Friends, neighbors, we're gathered here to celebrate not just the opening of a school, but the generosity and vision of Cooper Irving and the dedication of Katherine Shaw. For too long, our children have gone without proper education. Today, that changes. Mr. Irving, would you like to say a few words?" Cooper hadn't prepared a speech, but he stepped forward. "I'm not much for fancy words. I build things with my hands, not my mouth, but I'll say this." Katherine Shaw came to Bisbee and saw a need. Instead of complaining about it or waiting for someone else to fix it, she took action. She taught children under a tree in blazing heat and spring storms because she believed education matters. That kind of dedication deserves support. This school is for her, for the children, and for every family in this community. May it serve you well for generations to come. People applauded, and then Katherine spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. "When I lost my husband, I thought I'd lost everything. But this community gave me purpose and hope. These children gave me a reason to keep going. And Cooper Irving gave me the means to do what I love. This school represents everything good about Bisbee. It's proof that when people care about each other, when they work together, anything is possible. Thank you all for your support, your trust, and your children. I promise to serve them well." More applause, and then Katherine cut a ribbon Cooper had strung across the door. Children rushed inside, exclaiming over the desks and books. Parents followed, marveling at the quality of construction and the thoughtful details. Cooper stood back, watching Katherine move through the crowd, accepting congratulations and answering questions. Marcus Webb appeared at Cooper's elbow. "You did good, boss. Real good." "Thanks, Marcus. Couldn't have done it without you and the men." "Maybe not, but this was your vision. And I think it's about time you told that woman how you feel about her." Cooper glanced at his foreman in surprise. "That obvious, to anyone with eyes. You've been like a different person these past weeks. Happy, alive. Don't let fear hold you back from something good." Before Cooper could respond, Katherine's voice called out from inside the school. "Cooper, come look at this." He entered to find her standing by the window, pointing outside. There, approaching the schoolhouse, was a wagon loaded with books. Dozens of books, maybe hundreds. "What in the world?" Katherine breathed. Cooper was as confused as she was until the wagon driver, a man he recognized from town named Samuel Martin, climbed down and called out, "Delivery for the new school." "Where do you want them?" "Who sent these?" Katherine asked, hurrying outside. "Donation from various folks in town," Samuel said, consulting a paper. The mine owners kicked in, several of the saloon owners, shopkeepers, even some of the working girls from the Red Garter pooled their money. Everyone wanted to contribute something. Katherine's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll put them to good use teaching our kids," Samuel said with a grin. "That'll be thanks enough." It took an hour to unload all the books and arrange them on the shelves. There were primers for young children, mathematics texts, history books, geography, science, even some literature and poetry. It was a better collection than many established schools in larger towns could boast. As the sun began to set and the crowd dispersed, Cooper and Katherine found themselves alone in the school. She walked slowly around the room, running her fingers along the desks, the windowsills, the shelves of books. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will all be a dream," she said softly. Cooper came to stand beside her. "It's not a dream. It's real and it's yours." "Ours," she corrected, turning to face him. "I could never have done this alone." They stood close, closer than was strictly proper, and Cooper felt the magnetic pull toward her that had been building for weeks. "Katherine, I need to tell you something." "I know," she said simply. "I feel it too." "Feel what?" "Whatever this is between us. This connection. I've felt it since that first day when you rode up to the cottonwood. I tried to tell myself it was gratitude or friendship or just loneliness seeking companionship. But it's more than that." Cooper's heart was pounding. "Katherine Shaw, I'm in love with you. I didn't plan it, didn't expect it, but it's true. These past weeks have been the happiest I've had in years. Not just because of the school, but because of you. Your strength, your kindness, your passion for making the world better. I want to court you properly if you'll let me. I want to see where this leads." Katherine's smile was radiant. "Cooper Irving, I would be honored to be courted by you. And I should tell you that I'm in love with you too. Somewhere between your crazy idea to build a school and that storm when we sheltered together, I fell completely in love with you." Cooper cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "May I kiss you? I was hoping you would." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she met him halfway. Their lips touched softly at first, a gentle exploration, then deeper as 3 years of loneliness and grief gave way to hope and love and promise. Katherine's arms wrapped around his neck, and Cooper pulled her closer, pouring all his emotions into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Cooper rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right. No rushing, no scandalizing the town. I'll court you properly." "How very respectable of you," Katherine said with a hint of teasing in her voice. "Though I think we may have already scandalized the town a bit with that storm incident." "True. But from now on, we do everything right. I'll call on you at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house with proper chaperonage. We'll attend church socials together. I'll bring you flowers and take you on picnics." "That sounds wonderful, though I hope you'll still give me rides home from school. Every single day if you'll let me." They stayed in the schoolhouse as darkness fell, talking about their hopes and dreams, their pasts and possible futures. Cooper told her about his plans to expand the ranch, his dream of breeding the finest cattle in Arizona territory. Katherine shared her ideas for the school, wanting to eventually add more advanced courses, and maybe even a small library open to the whole community. "Would you want children of your own?" Cooper asked carefully. "I know you and Henry never had any, and I don't know if that was by choice or circumstance." Katherine was quiet for a moment. "We tried. I had 2 miscarriages in 3 years. The doctor said there was no reason I couldn't carry a child to term, it just hadn't happened yet. Then Henry died, and I thought that dream died with him. But yes, I would love to have children." "Would you?" "Sarah and I lost one baby. She was 5 months along when fever took them both. I've always wanted to be a father." He squeezed her hand. "But if it doesn't happen for us, we'll have all the children in this school. That's a different kind of family, but a family nonetheless." "You're a good man, Cooper Irving." "I try to be. You make me want to be better." Eventually, they locked up the school and Cooper took Katherine back to town. This time, he dismounted with her and walked her to the door like a proper suitor. "May I call on you tomorrow afternoon after church?" he asked. "I'd like that very much." He kissed her hand, a chaste gesture that nonetheless sent shivers through both of them, and tipped his hat. "Until tomorrow, then." Until tomorrow. The courtship that followed was the talk of Bisbee. Cooper showed up at church for the first time in 3 years, sitting beside Katherine in the pew. They attended town socials together, went on supervised picnics with Mrs. Henderson as chaperone, and took long walks through town where everyone could see them. Cooper brought Katherine flowers every Sunday, whatever he could find blooming on the prairie. Katherine sewed him new shirts and made him sweets, discovering he had a fondness for apple pie. They shared books, reading the same volumes and then discussing them endlessly. They attended the school's first official day of classes together, watching with pride as children filled the desks. Katherine proved to be an exceptional teacher. She had a gift for making even difficult subjects interesting, and she truly cared about each student's progress. Children who had been struggling with basic reading were suddenly devouring books. Mathematics made sense under her patient instruction. She taught not just subjects but life skills, character, and the importance of being good citizens. Cooper found reasons to visit the school regularly, sometimes bringing supplies, other times just wanting to see Katherine in her element. He loved watching her teach, the way she engaged with students, her patience with those who struggled, and her encouragement of those who excelled. 3 months into their courtship, on a perfect autumn evening with the Arizona sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Cooper asked Katherine to marry him. They were at the ranch, sitting on the porch of his house, looking out over the land. "I know it hasn't been that long," Cooper said, holding both her hands, "but I'm certain about this about us. I love you, Katherine. I want to spend my life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to build a life together, have children if we're blessed with them, grow old watching sunsets just like this. Will you marry me?" Katherine's eyes were shining with tears. "Yes. Yes, Cooper, I'll marry you. I love you so much." He slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched her eyes. "It's not much, but it's perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect." They married 6 weeks later in November of 1882, in a ceremony held at the schoolhouse because Katherine said that's where their story truly began. The whole town attended, cramming into the building that suddenly seemed too small for all the well-wishers. Katherine wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Cooper wore his finest suit, his hair neatly trimmed, looking happier than anyone had seen him in years. Marcus Webb stood as his best man, and Mrs. Henderson as Katherine's matron of honor. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about second chances and new beginnings. When Cooper kissed his bride, the assembled crowd cheered so loudly they probably heard it in town. The reception was held outdoors under the cottonwood tree, with tables laden with food brought by various families. There was music and dancing, children running and playing, laughter and joy. As the sun set, Cooper and Katherine slipped away, riding together to the ranch that was now their home. Cooper carried Katherine over the threshold, and she laughed with pure delight. "Welcome home, Mrs. Irving." "It feels like home already," Katherine said, looking around the house that had been cleaned and decorated by Mrs. Chen and several other ranch wives. Flowers filled vases, candles were lit, and the bed had fresh linens. That night they came together as husband and wife, and it was beautiful and tender and everything first times should be. Cooper was patient and gentle, and Katherine was trusting and loving. They learned each other's bodies the way they'd learned each other's hearts, with care and attention and growing passion. Afterward, lying wrapped in each other's arms, Cooper whispered, "I never thought I'd be this happy again." "Neither did I," Katherine replied. "We've both lost so much, but maybe we had to go through that darkness to truly appreciate this light. I wish Sarah and Henry could have lived, could have had the lives they deserved, but I'm grateful that their loss somehow led us to each other." "They're with us in a way," Katherine said thoughtfully. The love we had for them taught us how to love deeply. The grief we survived made us stronger. We can honor their memories by living fully, by being happy." Cooper kissed her forehead. "You're absolutely right. I'll love you with everything I am, Katherine, for all my days. And I'll love you forever." The first year of their marriage was one of adjustment and joy. Katherine continued teaching and Cooper ran the ranch, but they made time for each other every day. Breakfast together before dawn. Katherine packing lunch for Cooper to take out on the range. Dinner together every evening, talking about their days. Evenings spent reading together, or playing the fiddle that Cooper had finally taken out again at Katherine's urging, or simply sitting on the porch watching the stars. They became a fixture in Bisbee, the rancher and the teacher, always together, obviously in love. They attended church socials and town meetings. They hosted dinners at the ranch for Cooper's men and their families. Katherine started a lending library out of the school, open to adults as well as children. Cooper funded expansion of the school building, adding a second room so Katherine could separate younger and older students. The question of children hung unspoken between them. Katherine's monthly courses came regularly, a disappointment each time. After 6 months of marriage, they had a difficult conversation. "Maybe it's not meant to be," Katherine said sadly, lying in bed one night after another disappointment. "Maybe I'm just not able to carry a baby to term." "Or maybe it just hasn't happened yet," Cooper said, pulling her close. "We have time, Katherine. You're only 26, I'm 32, we're not ancient. But what if, no what ifs, we have each other, we have the school and the children we teach, we have a good life. If a baby comes, we'll be blessed. If not, we're still blessed. I married you because I love you, not because of what you might give me." Katherine cried into his chest, releasing months of hope and disappointment and fear. Cooper held her, stroking her hair, whispering reassurances. They fell asleep intertwined, committed to facing whatever came together. 2 months later, Katherine missed her monthly course. She didn't say anything at first, afraid to hope. But when a second month passed and she began feeling nauseous in the mornings, she allowed herself to believe. She told Cooper one evening after school, standing in the kitchen of their home. "I think I might be with child," she said quietly. Cooper froze in the act of pouring coffee. "You think? I'm 2 months late and I've been ill most mornings." I didn't want to say anything until I was sure, but I think this might be real. He crossed to her in 2 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "Katherine, this is wonderful." "Careful," she laughed. "Put me down before you make me sick again." He set her down gently, his hands immediately going to her still flat stomach. "There's really a baby in there." "I believe so. We should have the doctor confirm it, but yes, I think we're going to have a baby." Cooper's eyes filled with tears. "I never thought I'd have this chance. After Sarah and the baby died, I thought that door was closed forever." "We're getting our second chance," Katherine said, her own eyes wet. "Both of us." Dr. Morrison confirmed the pregnancy a week later, estimating the baby would arrive in early summer of 1884. Katherine was healthy and strong, and the doctor saw no reason to expect complications, though he cautioned that her previous miscarriages meant they should be careful. Katherine continued teaching through the winter and spring, though she tired more easily and had to sit down more often during lessons. The students were excited about their teacher having a baby, and the older girls especially loved asking questions and feeling the baby kick when it grew large enough. Cooper became almost comically protective. He insisted Katherine ride in a wagon to school instead of walking. He tried to convince her to stop teaching altogether, but she refused, saying she felt fine and the children needed her. They compromised on her training an assistant teacher, a young woman named Lucy Mills, who could take over when the baby came. As Katherine's belly grew, Cooper found himself touching it constantly, marveling at the life growing inside. He talked to the baby, read to it, played fiddle music for it. Katherine teased him about spoiling the child before it was even born, but she loved his excitement and involvement. On a hot June evening in 1884, Katherine's water broke during dinner. Cooper, who had been remarkably calm throughout the pregnancy, suddenly panicked. He ran to get Mrs. Chen, sent a rider for the doctor, and paced the bedroom floor while Katherine breathed through contractions. "Cooper, please sit down," Katherine said during a break between pains. "You're making me nervous." I'm sorry, I just feel so useless. Tell me what to do. Hold my hand and breathe with me. That's all I need." The labor was long and difficult. 18 hours of increasingly intense contractions while Cooper held Katherine's hand, gave her ice chips, and prayed harder than he'd ever prayed. Dr. Morrison arrived and examined her, pronouncing everything normal, just slow. Finally, as the sun rose on a new day, Katherine gave one final push and their son entered the world, wailing lustily. Cooper cut the cord with shaking hands while the doctor cleared the baby's airway and checked him over. "You have a healthy boy, doctor," Morrison announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped infant in Katherine's arms. Cooper sank onto the bed beside his wife, staring in wonder at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. "He's perfect," he whispered. "He's ours," Katherine said, tears streaming down her face. "Our son." They named him Henry Samuel Irving, honoring Katherine's late husband and Cooper's father. Little Henry had his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the start, he had a strong will and healthy lungs. Fatherhood transformed Cooper. He doted on his son, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor at night when Henry fussed, singing lullabies in his rough voice. He cut back on ranch work to spend more time at home, delegating more to Marcus and the other hands. Katherine took 3 months away from teaching, with Lucy covering her classes. During that time, she fell completely in love with motherhood. Despite sleepless nights and constant feedings, she'd never been happier. Watching Cooper with their son, seeing the gentle way he held Henry and the wonder in his eyes, made her love him even more. When Katherine returned to teaching that fall, they brought Henry with them. Cooper had added a small addition to the schoolhouse, a private room where Katherine could nurse the baby and where Henry could nap while she taught. It was unconventional, but it worked for their family. The children in school adored baby Henry. The older girls took turns holding him during lunch breaks, and even the boys were charmed by his gummy smiles. Henry grew up in that schoolhouse, crawling between the desks, learning his letters by osmosis, surrounded by education and love. 2 years later, Katherine became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and their daughter Katherine Rose Irving arrived in the spring of 1887 after only 6 hours of labor. She was smaller than Henry had been, with copper-colored hair and her father's dark eyes. 2 children, Cooper said, holding his daughter while Henry, now almost 3, peered curiously at his new sister. "Our family is complete." "Is it?" Katherine asked with a smile. "You don't want more?" "I want whatever makes you happy. If you want 10 children, we'll have 10 children. If you're content with these 2, then so am I." They ended up with 4 children. William Cooper Irving arrived in 1889, and their youngest, Sarah Marie Irving, in 1891. The house that had once felt too large and empty for just Cooper now rang with children's laughter, cries, questions, and play. The school continued to thrive. As the children grew, Katherine gradually increased her teaching hours, though she always made time to be home when the children needed her. Lucy became a full-time assistant teacher. then eventually took over the younger students entirely while Katherine focused on the older ones. Cooper expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land and increasing the herd. He became one of the most successful ranchers in Arizona Territory, known for his quality cattle and fair treatment of workers. He hired more men, many of them fathers of Katherine's students, creating a tight community around the ranch and school. The schoolhouse had to be expanded twice more to accommodate the growing number of students. By 1895, there were over 60 children attending, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Some traveled from as far as 10 miles away, boarding with families in town during the week so they could receive an education. Several of Katherine's early students went on to attend universities back east, coming home with degrees to become doctors, lawyers, engineers, and teachers themselves. One of her students, Tommy Marshall, the freckled boy who'd asked if they were done on that first day Cooper saw Katherine, became a teacher himself and opened a school in a neighboring county, modeling it after Katherine's. As Arizona moved toward statehood, Cooper became involved in territorial politics, advocating for education funding and land rights for small ranchers. Katherine joined the Territorial Board of Education, helping to set standards for schools across Arizona. Together, they became influential voices in shaping the future of their adopted home. Their children grew up strong and loved. Henry inherited his father's love of ranching and his mother's quick mind. Katherine was quieter, bookish, always with her nose in a story. William was the adventurer, constantly exploring and getting into harmless mischief. Sarah, the baby, had her father wrapped around her finger and her mother's determination. The years passed in a blur of happy moments, birthdays and holidays, school programs where their children performed, branding seasons and harvest times, summer picnics and winter sleigh rides, Sunday dinners with Marcus and his family, who had become like extended family, dances and socials and church services. Cooper and Katherine never lost the spark between them. Even after years of marriage and 4 children, they still sought each other out, still held hands, still kissed like newlyweds when they thought no one was watching. They made time for each other, monthly trips just the two of them to Tucson or Phoenix, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen and the ranch hands. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1902, they returned to the cottonwood tree where it all began. The schoolhouse had been expanded so much it barely resembled the original building, but the tree remained, ancient and strong. "You ever think about that first day?" Katherine asked, leaning against her husband. "When you rode up and found me teaching under this tree, I think about it all the time," Cooper admitted. "How lonely I was before that moment. How close I came to riding past without stopping. If I had, my whole life would be different. Mine too. I'd probably still be teaching under this tree, stubborn as I was. I never would have had the school or you or our beautiful children." "We were both so broken," Cooper mused, "trying to survive our grief, just going through the motions, but somehow we found each other and made something beautiful out of our pain." Katherine turned to face him, her hair now shot through with silver, her face lined with age but still beautiful to Cooper's eyes. "I love you as much today as I did 20 years ago, maybe more, because now I know what we've built together." Cooper cupped her face, his own hands weathered from decades of ranch work. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Katherine Irving. The school, the children, the life we've created, all of it stems from you. From your courage to teach under a tree, from your acceptance when a lonely rancher offered to build you a schoolhouse, from your generosity in building it, from your willingness to love again. We did this together, Cooper." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, the kiss of a man who knew exactly how precious the woman in his arms was. Around them, The prairie stretched endlessly, their ranch prospering in the distance, the school filled with the next generation. Everything they'd built, everything they'd become, had started here under this tree with a chance encounter that changed both their lives. Years continued to pass. Henry took over much of the ranch management as Cooper slowed down, though he never fully retired. Katherine married a teacher from Tucson and opened her own school. William became a surveyor, mapping Arizona's changing landscape. Sarah married one of Katherine's former students who'd become a lawyer, and they settled in Phoenix. Cooper and Katherine became grandparents, then great-grandparents. Their house remained open to family, always room for one more at the table, always welcome for children and grandchildren who needed a place to stay or advice or just their love. The school continued long after Katherine retired from daily teaching, run by Lucy, and then by a succession of teachers trained in Katherine's methods. It became known as one of the finest schools in Arizona, preparing students not just for work but for life. On a spring morning in 1920, Cooper woke to find Katherine still sleeping beside him. They were both in their 70s now, moving slower but still sharp and engaged with life. He watched her sleep, this woman who had transformed his existence, who had given him love, children, purpose, and joy. She opened her eyes and smiled at him. "Good morning. Good morning, beautiful. You're a terrible liar. I'm an old woman. You're my old woman, and you're still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." They rose slowly, helping each other dress, a comfortable routine developed over decades. After breakfast, they took their customary walk around the ranch, Cooper's arm around Katherine's waist, her head on his shoulder. "You have any regrets?" Katherine asked. "Only that we didn't find each other sooner," Cooper replied. "But I suppose we each needed to experience what we did to become who we are. Sarah and Henry made us capable of the love we share now. I like to think they're watching over us, happy that we found each other. I'm sure they are." They stopped at the cottonwood tree, now truly ancient, its branches spreading wide over the schoolhouse that bore a plaque reading Irving School, founded 1882, in honor of Katherine Shaw Irving, whose dedication to education changed countless lives. "We did good, didn't we?" Katherine said softly. "We did better than good. We built something that will outlast us. Not just the school, but the family, the values, the love. That's the real legacy." They stood together under the tree, two people who had found each other in grief and built a life of joy, watching the sun rise over the land they'd loved, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Years later, when both had passed peacefully in their sleep within days of each other, their children gathered to remember them. The funeral was held at the Irving School, packed with former students, now elderly themselves, who shared stories of the teacher who believed in them and the rancher who made her dreams possible. The eulogy was given by Tommy Marshall, the freckled boy now in his 60s, himself a grandfather. "Cooper and Katherine Irving didn't just build a school," he said. "They built a community. They showed us that love can bloom after loss, that second chances exist, that one person caring enough to take action can change the world." Katherine taught us to read and write, but both of them taught us how to live. How to love deeply, work hard, care for others, and never give up on what matters. This school stands as testament to their love story, but so do all of us who benefited from their generosity and vision. Cooper and Katherine were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch and the school, under the same wide Arizona sky they'd loved. Their headstones simply read, "Together they built more than a school. They built a life of love." The Irving School continued operating for decades more, eventually becoming part of Arizona's public school system, but retaining its name and commitment to excellence. The original schoolhouse was preserved as a historical site, tours given to show how education happened in frontier Arizona. The cottonwood tree remained, ancient and gnarled, protected by law from ever being cut down. Children still played in its shade. Couples proposed beneath its branches. And sometimes, on quiet afternoons, people swore they could hear the echo of children's laughter and a woman's voice reading, drifting across the prairie like a memory of love that refused to fade. The ranch stayed in the Irving family for generations. Each new generation taught the story of how it all began. How a lonely rancher out checking his fences heard laughter and found a woman teaching children under a tree. How he fell in love with her dedication and spirit. How he built her a schoolhouse to win her heart. How that simple act of generosity blossomed into a love story that spanned decades and touched countless lives. In the end, Cooper and Katherine's greatest legacy wasn't the school or the ranch, or even their children and grandchildren. It was the proof that love can heal, that second chances are real, that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. They showed that sometimes, when you least expect it, life gives you another chance at happiness. And when it does, you grab hold with both hands and build something beautiful that will outlast you, echoing through generations. A testament to what's possible when two broken hearts find each other and choose to love again. Their story became legend in Arizona, told and retold, embellished and romanticized, but always rooted in truth. The lonely rancher and the dedicated teacher, building a school together, falling in love in the process, creating a life that mattered. It was a love story for the ages, set against the harsh beauty of the Arizona frontier, proving that even in the wildest of places, love can flourish and change the world.